Good morning, everyone. We'll let everyone join the program this morning and just give us a few seconds. In the meantime, if you'd like to jot down any of the information on our COVID-19 resources, I'll leave that page up for you. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, good morning. My name is Carrie Broderson, and I manage the Partnerships, Events, and Business Resource Groups here at the Greater Houston Partnership. Today, we're going to be hearing from Bob Harvey, President and CEO of the Greater Houston Partnership, for his member address, and then followed by Taylor Landin, the Partnership's Senior Vice President of Public Policy. At this time, if you would just check the features on your screen, chat will be used for just comments. Staff, and then you can use the Q&A tab if you have any questions for our speakers at the end of the program. We will be taking questions at that time. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Bob Harvey, again, President and CEO of the Greater Houston Partnership. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Carrie. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you've already had many chances to tune into our COVID-19 Business Forum series webinars. These are intended to offer our members presentations with local experts and leaders discussing the latest information and analysis on the COVID-19 crisis. Yesterday, our Senior Vice President of Research, Patrick Jankowski, provided an update on the pandemic's impact on the global and local economy. And over the past webinars, we've had representatives from the SBA, the Texas Workforce Commission, Workforce Solutions, and local lending institutions, all offering guidance on programs and aid available to support businesses through these unprecedented times. Recordings of all these discussions can be found on our website at houston.org, where you can also find the latest on all of our upcoming programs. Today, I'd like to share a few updates on the partnership's activity and programming surrounding COVID-19. Let's start with the CARES Act, the $2 trillion package passed in late March, which is intended to provide immediate aid to individuals and small businesses. The most notable aspect of the CARES Act was the Paycheck Protection Program that we've all heard so much about. That program provides $350 billion in federally guaranteed loans to businesses with 500 employees or less. These loans are forgivable, provided the funds are used to maintain payroll employees or go toward other qualifying expenses. I'm pleased to report that Houston businesses began receiving their direct deposits of Paycheck Protection Program funds beginning last Friday. We've heard a number of reports of individuals who received those funds on Friday or then following this week. It's a reflection of, in my mind, of the great support that we have received from Houston banking institutions, as well as the guidance and support that Houston businesses have received from the partnership, but the local SBA office and many others, that it seems to have led the Houston business community to fare fairly well in this first come, first served process. There's a lot of discussion in Washington right now about what we refer to as a COVID-4 package, meaning it will be the fourth major piece of legislation directed at COVID relief. We expect that a COVID-4 package would replenish the triple P funds, which are expected to be exhausted here very quickly, and possibly include funds for state and local government and hospitals, among other things. So we do believe that funding for a host of other issues, such as infrastructure, will likely be deferred until a still later piece of legislation, something that we just refer to as COVID-5. I mentioned that Patrick provided an economic update just yesterday, but I would like to take a few moments to share a few of the key takeaways from his presentation. As you know, Houston is dealing with the combined impact of the virus and the impact of the collapse of oil prices. And while these two are somewhat related, we should not assume that the recovery in oil and gas will follow the same trajectory as the economic recovery from the virus when that occurs. In that regard, I wanted to share the latest Purchasing Manager Index figures, PMI as it's called. And as you can see on this slide, the index plummeted to 40 last month, and anything below 50 signals contraction, particularly out over the next 3 to 4 to 5 months. But 40 suggests a very sharp decline. So no surprise here, given what has happened, and frankly, it may well get worse before it gets better. On the employment front, we've seen 3 consecutive weeks of very high unemployment claims. Now, rounding a bit, as you see on these charts, these last few weeks total about 180,000 in local claims above the normal rate of a few thousand per reporting period. I expect that we'll see that number be high this week and next as well. We could easily see, in my mind and Patrick's mind, another 100,000 of jobless claims in the weeks ahead. Now, where does that put us in a historical context? Based on the unemployment claims that have been filed to date, we would estimate that the unemployment rate in Houston has already grown to about 8.6%. And if we add another 100,000 unemployed to that level, we'll push that unemployment rate up to more than 11%, maybe 11.5%. The record unemployment we've seen in Greater Houston ever was 12.9% back in June of '86. That's why Patrick and I make frequent reference to the mid-'80s. For those of you that were in Houston in the mid-'80s, you know how tough that period was when we lost 1 out of 7 net jobs in Houston over that period. So we're heading towards a similar level of unemployment, but in this case, it's occurring very, very quickly, whereas in the '80s, it occurred over a period of several years. So we're in for some very tough times, and the partnership is thinking hard about how we can take steps to renew our economy in the weeks and months ahead. Now, the partnership launched the Houston Business Barometer 2 weeks ago, and this is a weekly pulse survey of our 850 member companies with less than 500 employees. It's designed to help us know how these companies are doing and suggest courses of action for the partnership. Some takeaways from this week's survey. One, in keeping with what I was just saying, the economic indicators are getting worse. Furloughs and layoffs are up. Revenue continues to drop across all the industries represented in this survey. 1/5 of the survey respondents reported layoffs or furloughs. No surprise, the hospitality industry is the hardest hit, as evidenced by the survey. 90% of the respondents from the hospitality industry indicated that they were facing at least partial shutdowns to their operations, and 100% of the respondents indicated that they had had a severe impact on their business. Goods producers, on the other hand, people that make product, goods producers are faring better than most everyone else, with fewer workforce reductions and more modest revenue losses. And most of them, whether they're in construction or manufacturing, are able to continue to operate in that they've been deemed essential industries. Professional service firms constitute the largest segment of the survey. That's reflective, frankly, of our membership of smaller companies tends to be skewed towards professional service firms. Most professional firms are continuing full operations remotely, but many are having to take steps to align their expenses with their revenue, and they're doing so by cutting salaries and other means of cutting their expenses. But they're able to continue to operate by teleworking, just as we are able to do at the partnership. So let me shift gears. Let me talk now about some of the programs the partnership has launched since the beginning of the virus pandemic. And let me start with what we call the Work Safe program. As we were talking to Judge Hidalgo and Mayor Turner back several weeks ago about the likely outlines of a stay-at-home order, we encouraged them very much to put emphasis on maintaining a safe work environment because so many of Houston's companies would be deemed essential employers using the federal standard that was employed. So we wanted to have a balance between staying home and working safe. And that's why when Judge Hidalgo issued the order, it was called Stay Home, Work Safe. It was probably the only city that I can think of where the order had that balance to it. So working with the city and the county, we've developed what we're calling the COVID-19 Work Safe Company Guidelines and a whole set of branding around that. The purpose of which is to encourage companies who are still operating to do so in a safe manner. And if you haven't seen these guidelines yet, take a moment to look on our site at houston.org/worksafe, houston.org/worksafe. These guidelines are displayed here on the screen. There's more of an explanation for each one on our website. The idea is that it's critical for companies that are still open to be very serious about providing a safe work environment for their essential employees. You might call this an outline. There's a lot more behind this. And in many ways, it's intended to get companies simply to think very seriously about the steps they're taking to protect their employees. As of yesterday, we've had 122 companies sign on to this pledge on our website, which we appreciate. We ask that all of you consider signing up on the website. There's a short form to fill out so we can count your company as among those that have taken the pledge. But even if you don't take the pledge, there's something there for you to consider as you attempt to create a safe work environment for your essential employees. Later in this program, Taylor Landin will talk about how we restart the Houston economy. And one element of that is, what can we expect from business in terms of their willingness to take steps to protect employees? People can only go back to work if we're able to believe that we can provide a safe work environment. And let me move on to the Business Recovery Center. The partnership launched the Greater Houston Business Recovery Center to engage with Houston businesses of all types and connect them to the resources needed to stay afloat and position for the recovery. The center aims to inform our members and the broader Houston business community about the federal lending programs and other resources that are available, particularly to small and mid-sized businesses and nonprofit organizations. So right now on the Recovery Center website, which is located at houston.org/recovery, so again, houston.org/recovery, business owners can access all of the most up-to-date information and resources related to business recovery from experts like the U.S. Chamber, the Small Business Administration, Texas Workforce Commission, regional small business development centers, and many, many others. The Recovery Center is also building out a robust webinar schedule, as I mentioned at the outset of this program. And let me turn to one other program that's much more recent. While the first two programs that I've mentioned are clearly focused on businesses, we launched a campaign last week that is focused more on broad community messaging. And we call this program the Stay Home, Save Lives campaign. As part of this campaign, we produced a PSA that is now airing on the local network channels, ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox. And in addition, we cut a Spanish language version, which is running on Telemundo. A number of local celebrities have also posted personal videos on their social media channels to help spread the word to Stay Home H-Town. Think about it, Stay Home H-Town. Thus far, we've seen videos from Jim Nance, Michael Strahan, Josh Reddick from the Astros, and Tina Lawson-Knowles, Beyonce's mother, who herself has about 3 million followers on her social channels. So let's take a moment to view the PSA. Go ahead, Carrie.
This isn't a game. This isn't a competition. This isn't a vacation. Sports are canceled and businesses are closed because this virus kills. Hospitals around the world are overwhelmed and the losses are overwhelming. Houston has one chance for our friends and families, for the love of our city, and for our very survival. The choice is yours. Stay home, Houston.
Hey, Houston, it's Jim Nance, just reminding everyone to please stay safe, stay home, and stay positive because we're going to get through this. There is nothing right now worth the risk, nothing at all. It can wait. We're going to get through this, and it may be soon, but we need your help. Please, please look after everyone in this community by doing your part. Stay home. Houston, we are H-Town for a reason. H for heroes. Hero Town USA, for all those who are doing their part, all those responders and health services folks, you are in fact the ones we call heroes in H-Town. Please be safe, be careful, be smart, and let's get through this together. God bless you all.
What's up, everybody? Houston Astros right fielder Josh Reddick here, reminding everybody that we need to stay home, work safe, and just keep our distance, because local experts are saying that we are just a few handful of days from being a hotspot here in Houston from this coronavirus. It's an invisible enemy. I know the kids are driving you crazy. I know you want to get out there and hang out with your friends, your family, your coworkers even. And we just got to stay focused on the task at hand right now. We can't let this spread anymore. We got to get ready for Wine Wednesdays with our friends. We got to go out there for Trivia Tuesdays, all these kind of fun things that we want to do. We just can't do right now. We just need to stay home and keep the gap from everybody. And that's the best case scenario we can hope for. Y'all have a good one. Stay safe.
Hey Houston, this is Michael Strahan with a very important message to you. I just want to tell everyone, stay home. I know the kids are driving you crazy. I know you want to have a play date. I know you want to work out with your friends or go have a drink with your friends. Right now, you cannot do that. It's the worst thing you can do. Staying home is the best thing you can do for yourself, for your family, for your friends, for your community, for the great city of Houston, and for all the healthcare workers who put their lives on the line every day. For you and me. Stay home, the best thing you can do right now, because all the studies have shown if you don't stay home, if you don't adhere by the guidelines that are out there, it could lead to some devastating things that none of us want to see and none of us want our families to experience. So love you, okay? Love everybody else around you, and you can show the ultimate love right now in Houston by staying home. Stay home, Houston.
All righty, Carrie, thank you. Give that a minute. There we go. I must say, by the way, that when we drop video on a Zoom call like this, it loses some of the quality. So if you get a chance to look at our website, you'll see that these are pretty high quality videos. In total, these videos have now been viewed by over 220,000 people on social media. And that doesn't even include the broadcast TV airings of the PSA across the networks. So we would certainly encourage you to share these posts on your own social media accounts and to encourage those across our entire community to stay at home and help curb the spread of COVID-19. When sharing, please remember to use the hashtag StayHomeHtown, hashtag StayHomeHtown. And you can find these videos, as I mentioned, on the partnership's Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. As many of you know, the partnership is known for offering our members in Houston's business community many ways to convene and comment at our events and programs. And during this time of social distancing, the partnership has found a way to continue to connect leaders and experts with our members to discuss timely topics that impact Houston's business community. At the beginning of this address, I shared a little bit about our COVID-19 Houston Business Forum series, and those will continue to be held at noon on Tuesdays and Thursdays. In addition to our business forum, we're also pleased to share that beginning last week, we reconvened our business resource groups with a meeting of our business development BRG. In the coming weeks, you will see programming from all of the BRGs. These are our affinity groups. All that programming will ramp up in the weeks ahead. Beginning next week, we will also restart our weekly council meetings on Tuesday afternoons. Many of you are familiar with our council meetings. Traditionally, they have met Tuesday at noon. They're going to be Tuesday afternoons beginning next week. Details about all of this programming can be found on our website, and I hope you'll join us for these sessions. And we invite you to share topics you would be interested in discussing during these programs by emailing member.engagement@houston.org. To repeat, member.engagement@houston.org. Staying on the topic of events, in coordination with Mayor Turner, we have made the hard decision to postpone the annual State of the City Luncheon that was originally scheduled for Friday, May 8th. We do plan to reschedule this event, and we hope it'll be a celebratory event as we emerge from the crisis. We will continue with our planned date for State of Houston's Global Economy, which is scheduled for Wednesday, May 27th. And this event will be hosted virtually and will feature Patrick Jankowski, our SVP Research. And he will deliver his annual Global Economy Report and provide an analysis of the impacts of the coronavirus, as well as downturns in the financial markets and the decline of the price of oil on both the global and local economy. We're also excited to share that former U.S. Secretary of Commerce and chair of Albright Stonebridge Group, Secretary Carlos Gutierrez, will join us for this event and share his perspectives on the global economy. Additional details will be posted on the partnership's website soon, and I hope you'll join us for this event. Before we conclude today's event, I want to turn to the topic of the latest trends with the COVID-19 virus, what it says about hospitalizations, ICU use, and the like. You may be aware that every morning at 7 a.m., the president of the Texas Medical Center, Bill McKeon, has a call with the CEOs of the hospitals and medical schools that comprise the Texas Medical Center. Every day they talk at 7 o'clock about the latest statistics. They share data. In fact, data is collected overnight so that at 7 o'clock in the morning, they're all looking at the same set of data on the community and importantly on what's happening in Houston. Twice a week, I'm invited to join a call immediately after that call where leaders of the health departments and emergency management departments of the city and the county meet with the TMC leadership. And I represent the business community on that call to talk about the latest trends and where things are headed in Houston. So I thought I would share just a few slides from yesterday's discussion. I'm sure there's a new set of slides out this morning. But let's start with this one. And the basic point of this slide, and frankly the slides that follow, is that we're beginning to see the beneficial impact of the steps that we took as a community now, 2 weeks or so, 2 to 3 weeks ago. And what that represents is the beginning of a flattening in the curves. And it doesn't hardly matter which of the curves you're looking at, you're beginning to see a flattening. This is a curve on the number of confirmed cases in the greater Houston area. This is the MSA, 9-county MSA. And what you see there is the rapid growth that we were experiencing in early, mid, late March, early April. And then you'll recall the steps that were put in place in mid-March began to have some impact on the rate of growth. We went from tripling every 7 days to then being 2.5 times every 7 days, and now more or less doubling every 7 days, which is a great improvement. Now we do see day-to-day volatility. You never want to react to just the latest data point on this curve or any other curve. You want to see it averaged out over time, but we're beginning to see a flattening, and that flattening is the result of the steps we took as a community to create social distancing, to end the larger assemblies of people, beginning, of course, with the announcement to cancel the rodeo way back. I think that was March 13th, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it's March 11th. So let's go to the next slide. And I won't do this slide justice. There's some basic points I'd like to make from this slide. So the TMC leaders compare data that looks at all the member institutions. And of course, these are not all the hospitals in Houston. These are just the hospitals that fall within the TMC, but this includes all of their locations. So Memorial Hermann obviously sits in the Texas Medical Center, but it has campuses all around the region. This counts all of Memorial Hermann's capacity, for example. And so a chart like this, and they have other charts, this looks at ICU capacity in Houston. And what you see down in green is that a lot of ICU capacity is used by people that aren't COVID-19 related. Obviously, we had people in ICU independent of the virus. So we see some capacity being taken. And then we see the COVID-19 patients. And by the way, this includes both people that have tested positive as well as people for whom the test results are waiting but are demonstrating the symptoms of COVID-19. So you see how 330 ICU rooms are being taken by those. And then you see additional capacity above that. Now on the right, what you'll see in green was some modeling done some weeks ago that said, where might we end up if we use aggressive social distancing policy in Houston? Where might we end up in yellow if we have moderate social distancing? Where might we end up in red if we had minimal social distancing, which was, you might say, the path we were on in early March? And what it showed was, if we were aggressive with social distancing, there was a reason to believe that we could manage within our capacity. And again, this is the ICU chart. There are charts like this for a lot of other things. It also recognized that the hospitals themselves can create surge capacity no matter what the issue is. They can actually create additional ICU beds, for example. So that's called surge capacity. And we might need that surge capacity if we were on the moderate social distancing trajectory. And frankly, at the time, there was no clear way to close the gap if we ended up on the minimal social distancing trajectory. So this chart has been developed every day now for weeks. And what it has shown is that, we had created a fair bit of surge capacity potential, but also we began to see that we were operating within the base capacity of the medical center. Now, this can get away from you at any time, and the Texas Medical Center always says, do not take so much comfort in this that you don't think that things could get away from us. But right now, we're operating within these limits. Let's go to the next slide. So after looking at a whole series of slides like the previous slide, a slide like this is fairly simple. So we're plotting the census of COVID-19 patients at the Texas Medical Center institutions over time. And you see if they're COVID-19 positive, those are the ones that have tested positive. And a PUI is a person under investigation. That's someone who's shown symptoms, but we don't have the test results back. So the hospital system treats both the confirmed tests and PUIs the same. They're hospitalized, they're treated based on the symptoms. And so what this chart shows is what we all felt, that with a lack of social distancing in early March, we saw a flare up in late March, early April, that concerned all of us, frankly. And then since then, as the impact of the social distancing standards and all the things that Houstonians have done began to be felt, we have seen a very comforting trend in the rate of the census, called this hospitalizations for COVID in the medical center. And we have seen other charts, by the way, that include the non-medical center institutions like HCA and UTMB and others that point to a similar trend. Go to the next slide. So this is a similar slide, but now looking at ICU usage. Again, it doesn't have quite the peak. In fact, the peak was a little bit earlier for this slide, but it doesn't have quite the peak of the previous slide. And it does have that data point from yesterday, but what we've learned is you just get a lot of kind of unexplained day-to-day volatility, so we'll be looking at that data for the next day or two. So here's the point, and I believe that was my last slide on this topic, wasn't it, Carrie? My point in all this is, by virtue of the steps that we have taken as Houstonians, the steps that our leaders have insisted upon, meaning the judge and the mayor in terms of the stay home, work safe order, but also the things we've done initially voluntarily and to a large extent voluntarily today to stay at home. We have actually certainly begun to bend the curve, to flatten the curve, which was the objective all along, so that we would not overwhelm our medical system with patients that then could not be handled. And we didn't want to create the kind of crisis we've seen in Northern Italy or more recently in New York. So the indications are today that we have been successful at that. It's too early to declare victory, absolutely. And by the way, as I said, even when we see a stable trend or a declining trend, we can reverse that trend, and unfortunately, by our actions. So we still have to be very careful. But this has allowed us to begin a conversation about how we restart the Houston economy. And this is the big we. This is the policymakers, the business community, the medical community, and the public. How do we all together think about how one would restart the economy? Taylor Landin, the SVP of policy at the partnership, is our lead on an effort. So I'd like Taylor to just turn the floor over to you at this point.
Yeah, Bob, good morning. Lauren, Carrie, you guys want to turn on my video? Start my video. There we go. Good morning, everybody. Bob, I'm glad to be with you this morning, and I'm also thrilled to be with what looks like over 300 partnership members. It's you see Partnership Tower in projected behind me. I'm really excited about when the opportunity to get back to work and interact with all of our members in person. So let me talk about a few steps that we're taking here in Houston to help make that a reality. But first, let me mention just a couple of notes about the reopening, restarting efforts that are taking place at the national and then briefly at the state level. So a day or so ago, the White House announced a restarting task force. It was broken out into 17 different industry sectors from all across the business landscape in the country. And importantly, 2 members of the Greater Houston Partnerships Board of Directors were named to that task force. Steve Keen at Kinder Morgan and Ryan Lance at ConocoPhillips. And then if you look through the list of the other businesses that are represented there, there's many prominent Houston businesses that are represented. At the state level, we expect on Friday that Governor Abbott will make an announcement naming a statewide task force made up of business leaders and other key leaders in the state of Texas to help orchestrate the statewide reopening of our economy. So here at the local level and in the Houston region, the partnership's beginning to take a really hard look at the necessary elements that must be in place in order for Houston's economy to reopen. And so before I jump into some of those details, I do think it's really important for us as a community to remember where we were just a month ago. So in this environment, we all know that a day feels like a week feels like a month, and as Bob mentioned earlier, the rodeo, the decision to shut the rodeo was made at the second week of March. And then there were a series of decisions that were made after that, between closing the schools, instituting the stay-at-home order just a week later. All of these decisions that were made by local leaders took real guts for Judge Hidalgo and Mayor Turner to make these really tough decisions with an uncertain set of facts. And I think that what we know now, with the benefit of hindsight, is we know that those tough decisions have it's indisputable that those decisions have helped flatten the curve here in Houston. And so we shouldn't forget the importance of those early decisions by our local leaders that now have allowed us to get closer to this discussion about reopening the Houston economy. So as we move toward restart, the partnership is working on behalf of the business community and other stakeholders to develop guidelines and resources for businesses and provide policy recommendations to local leaders that will be focused on the steps necessary to reopen, to restart our economy safely, sustainably, and successfully. And so we're really excited that Mark Watts, former partnership chair and president of the Friedkin Group, has agreed to chair this effort, and he's already hard at work bringing together the right set of stakeholders to help us really better understand all of the things that need to happen before our economy gets back to full steam. So the way in which we're approaching this is that we have a series of principles that we have outlined that are guiding this effort. And so I'll run through those very quickly. The first is that we are going to balance public health considerations while promoting economic activity. That goes without saying, but that has to be phased and gradual, and really put public health considerations front and center. The second is we need to recognize that Houston's economy has very unique characteristics. So a plan that might work for a European country or another major metropolitan area in the United States might not work for Houston. And we have different industries with different risk profiles that we need to take into consideration. The third principle is that we will acknowledge the role that business plays in keeping all of us safe. So many of us our specific employers have a role to play to ensure that the workplace is safe, and therefore that we're keeping transmissions low and making sure that everyone stays safe in their work environment. The fourth principle is that we will put a high priority on establishing coordination between stakeholders and all of the various actors in this equation that must all work together if we're to achieve maximum success. The next one is that we will empower local policymaking. So we all need to recognize that smart local policy decisions can really accelerate economic activity. Just as the smart decisions made by the mayor and the judge related to canceling things and issuing the stay-home orders, those have had tremendous importance. And similarly, on the reopening, smart local policymaking will be a critical component of this. And finally, the last principle is that we will, through all of this, it is critically important that we take fully into consideration the impact of decision making related to vulnerable populations and ensuring equity and access for all Houstonians and everyone throughout the region as we work through all of these the policies that need to be in place in order for us to get back to work. So just a couple of notes on the tactical nature of this. So the partnership will form working groups that will be based on a risk profile that we think makes the most sense, and then we'll make recommendations about the actual phasing of these different industries back fully into the workplace as we move forward. So we also recognize that there are the critical importance that childcare and schools play in this in helping get the economy back up and running. Those are enablers that we have to be very smart around in order for this for the Houston economy to get back up and running. And the last thing I'll say is that this will absolutely be an iterative process. We will roll out in coordination with all of our local leaders a set of recommendations, and then we will inevitably we won't get them right the first time, but we'll keep iterating on those policies, on those practices that need to be in place until we get this right. Obviously, we'll be responsive to conditions on the ground as a part of that. So all of our members should recognize that the partnership is very much engaged in this. This is absolutely a top priority for us as an organization, because we all know that the sooner we can get back to work, the sooner that our economy can start moving forward. And we're all looking forward to getting back fully back to work. So, Bob, let me stop there, and you can correct any of my misstatements, or perhaps there may be some questions.
Great, Taylor. Thank you very much. And I won't correct any. I didn't pick up any misstatements. So we'll get to some of that in the Q&A perhaps. So let me close it so that we can move to Q&A. And let me kind of start where Taylor was when he began, is thanking all of you as members for your engagement in a whole set of issues over the last 6 to 8 weeks on this topic. I've been very proud to be a Houstonian, frankly. I'm proud of our leadership, proud of our public, proud of our business leaders and how they behave, proud of everyone on this call. So thank you for all that you've done. That positions us now to have the restart conversation that Taylor alluded to. You know, we're not out of this yet by any stretch, but I think we're going to begin that conversation around how Houston recovers from the virus. You all know that, as I said at the outset, the virus is not the only issue that plagues Houston right now. We also have a severe depression in the oil and gas sector. Those two are related. You know, the loss of demand associated with the global impact of the virus is certainly part of the oil and gas problem. So that if we can begin to improve the global economy, it will spill over to the oil and gas economy as well. But we're gonna be facing some tough times for the rest of the year. The partnership will do all it can to assist, to educate, to encourage smart public policy, all the things that we always do at the partnership. So with Carrie, with that, why don't we open the floor for questions and leave that open for a few minutes, see what people would like to talk about.
Great. I also encourage everyone who has a question to go ahead and drop that into the Q&A box. Looks like they're coming in right now. Bob, some pre-questions before the event started, and you did allude to them in your presentation. You know, there's a lot of bleak information that's out there right now. Do you see anything positive out of any of this? And that's just kind of, it could be just a comment in terms of your personal perspective, but any bright spots at all?
Carrie, I kind of smile when you ask that question because for conservative types like me that have been somewhat resisting working from home, teleworking, telecommuting, I think we all recognize that the workplace will never be the same. I think this recognition that we can work in a different fashion and work productively is the great realization of this whole experience. And so I'm really thrilled to think that we're going to be able to provide different work options than we have been able to before, and have them be accepted. So that's, you know, that's the bright spot in all this. And in addition, that we've just learned to work in new and better ways. But otherwise, I mean, I don't want to put too much of that. I mean, we're going to be in for a tough year for the rest of this year, to say the least.
Hey, Bob, we'll prove to everybody on the call that this is not scripted. I was going to say, one of the bright spots that has been mentioned is the level of coordination taking place at the Texas Medical Center. And I think that we should reference that. You have a frame of reference from being around Houston for a number of decades that may be informative for everybody on the call.
Well, you all know the history. The medical center has been hyper competitive among the various institutions, and with a lot of stress between the med schools and the clinical facilities and what have you. That's really made it hard for them to work together as a group. But I would credit the Texas Medical Center Incorporated, TMC Inc., which for years had a very passive role relative to those institutions that were all quite powerful. They have now become a much more effective convener that group and spokesperson, and the behaviors have all changed. And I think you're right, Taylor. This virus has pushed them together in a way that they would all acknowledge that they've never been able to work as effectively together. And I do think that's going to help us going forward. You know, the Texas Medical Center is a tremendous asset for Houston, not just as a clinical facility that we all can enjoy and benefit from, but as an employer and as a base of economic activity going forward. And conversations like around TMC3, this idea of a commercial hub, an innovation hub within the medical center, you know, that got some traction in the last year or two. I think this activity is going to propel that idea and many other similar ideas forward.
Bob, Taylor, that actually leads into another question that came in, and this is a, you know, futuristic, maybe kind of a Horizon 3 look, but you know, what is the partnership's vision for potentially a new economy after this is kind of, we passed the urgency of this situation? You know, you mentioned the medical center and TMC3, but is there a new vision for for our community, or anything that's arisen at this point? Any new technologies, anything out there that might send us on a pathway, a new pathway?
Well, I'd go back, we had developed what we call the Houston Next strategy. What does a future economy for Houston look like? And it has some key elements in it that we'll go back to. Now we'll have to decide, has the world changed so much that are these still relevant? But I suspect they will be. We know in energy, we need to transition to a clean, carbon sensitive world. We've got to make that transition happen. We want to position Houston as a leader in this new energy world that is very carbon conscious. Now, again, right, we had developed that strategy with the assumption that our core oil and gas business would be healthy, and we would be putting some effort behind the new technologies around renewables and what have you. And while we still want to do the latter, we have to pay more attention to the former. How do we protect the core oil and gas that, frankly, is going to fund a lot of that new energy work? So those two really go hand in hand. Jumping out, we know innovation is going to play a much greater role in Houston generally. So the efforts around startup activity, the innovation corridor, the ION that Rice is creating, those are still very, very important to Houston's future. And they take us towards a digital conversation. Houston still needs to progress as a strong digital hub. And by that, I mean everything from data analytics of all types, AI, machine learning, and all that. We have begun to embrace that, I would say, wholeheartedly over the last year or two in Houston, but we have to continue down that path. So I don't know that we'll have kind of entirely new strategic thrusts coming out of this. Maybe there's one that is a direct result of the virus, but it was also coming from some of the trade policy issues that preceded the virus. I think the idea of where you locate and how you manage supply chains will forever change by virtue of this virus. We had all become very comfortable with global supply chains, with almost ignoring physical distance and national boundaries as we thought about creating optimal supply chains. I think that thinking at that level of naivete, perhaps, is gone forever. And that may help Houston in the sense that we're a strong manufacturing hub, but we, like all US manufacturing hubs, we're losing business, losing share to the rest of the world. I think you're going to see reshoring is the term that's used for that. We are already seeing prospects coming to the partnership that want to talk about reshoring manufacturing back to the US, and they're looking at Houston. So that's maybe one element that will certainly get a lot more emphasis coming out of the virus than we were giving it before.
Thanks, Bob. A tool asks if there's any thinking in, how important data is right now, any thinking in terms of how we are going to plan to start up easing on social distancing and stay at home, but also how we're planning to track its impact on a possible resurgence of COVID.
Sure, that sounds like a restart question. Why don't you run with it, and I'll come in behind you if need be.
Yeah, I think that so certainly there's two elements of any restart that perhaps may not need to be in place in order for an economy to slowly start coming back online, but are inevitably a part of any strategy, and that is testing, large scale testing, and what's called contact tracing. And so those two elements are a part of any reopening strategy, and especially on the contact tracing, the data analytic component of that is hugely important. And so there's a lot of, in fact, I think it was over the weekend, Apple and Google, Apple and Google joined forces on what sounds like the beginning of a contact tracing tool. And so, there's a lot of innovation going on around both testing and contact tracing. And I think, that'll definitely be a part of any strategy. And I think that the data component of that just cannot be overstated how important that is.
Yeah, maybe I'll follow up with a couple points, Taylor. On the testing issue, some will suggest that testing is kind of a gate, that until we've achieved some level of testing, we cannot open the gate to restart. I think our view is that testing will be important. Testing will, in many ways, determine the pace at which we go. And we have to maintain control of the situation. If we don't know what's happening, we can't move at all. We certainly can't move quickly. So I think testing will be important, but there's not going to be some arbitrary standard where, until we're doing X thousand tests per day, we can't. I think we have to work within the testing limits that we have. We have to work within a hopefully improving testing picture. It shouldn't be static, but I think we can craft a restart program that's, while influenced by testing, isn't gated by testing. But that's what we're working on. We do recognize that Houston and Texas and the US generally have not excelled when it comes to testing. But we've also learned how to manage this issue based on symptoms and other factors. And we can continue to apply that going forward.
Great, thanks, Bob and Taylor. This question comes from Kay, and it's related to the convention industry in Houston and really around the country and the world, and actually takes a positive twist on meetings and conventions and restaurants and entertainment. But if Houston continues to outperform the rest of the nation, and I would say this question is probably in terms of our recovery potentially, or being less hit by the virus, do you see us as using this as leverage to bring conventions and business 2021 and beyond? Kind of a tricky question, right?
Let me step back a little bit. One thing that the question acknowledges is that Houston is actually faring better than most major American cities. There's a chart that the mayor uses each day in his press conference that shows Houston versus other cities, and that's on a per capita basis. So it's not, it adjusts for the size of the city. It looks at the city and the county separate and together versus the other major metros. And I don't know that Houstonians really appreciate the fact that, yes, at this point, Houston is doing better than most other major American cities. Certainly the cities of our size are larger. That was picked up in an AP story early this week, and it was nice to see the data confirmed, because it had just been a week, frankly, since Vice President Pence had made a comment highlighting how bad things were in Houston. We had a one-day blip in the data that somehow he had picked up, and it got into a conversation between he and the governor, and repeated by the governor. But frankly, that was a one-day blip, and the actual story for Houston is that we are in relatively good shape relative to other American cities. That's not to say we're out in front on this restart conversation. The president's comments and efforts in other cities, we are more or less moving alongside other American cities, at least in our discussion of restart. Now, we want to move quickly. We would, in some ways, like to be out in front since we are in a better situation than others. And maybe our restart plan can be better. Maybe it can be faster. We'll see. So we may be able to move ahead. Everything related to hospitality, conventions, I think is a big question mark right now for anyone thinking about restart. When do you allow large assemblies of people to happen again? That was the first place we attacked at the beginning. You remember when we said any group over 250? It may well be one of the last things we do in this process to allow such large gatherings to happen again. And at the same time, there's a lot of debate about travel. How do we bring travel back? How do we allow more people to travel through airports, on airplanes, and what have you? At this point, I certainly don't have any answers there. But at the same time, I wouldn't suggest any great degree of optimism that hospitality is going to lead us out of this in terms of the sequence of things that are going to happen. Now, restaurants, and I put that in a slightly different category. I think there are thoughts out there about how you manage a slower reopening of the restaurant industry, and Taylor's comments about we're really concerned about the equity in all this. You can imagine a restart plan that works very well for high-skilled workers, but somehow leaves out low-skilled workers. And when we think about equity, we're thinking, hey, we're going to be very conscious about how the restart plan is affecting different communities, different populations, different demographics. So maybe we can move restaurants along a little bit faster. But again, I don't see much optimism just generally out there right now about the pace at which hospitality will come back relative to other sectors.
Thanks, Bob. Eusebio, Taylor, this one might be for you from a public policy standpoint. Eusebio is asking, based on the fact that we do have essential workers that are able to go to work and to keep the economy going, does this lend any credence to possibly having, to restarting any kind of conversation or starting a conversation around a living wage? And Eusebio's specific question was for grocery workers or restaurant workers, but is living wage a conversation that has come up in any restart or policy conversation?
Maybe Taylor, I'll help you out on that one, because I don't think it has. It does remind me that situations like this will be settings where a lot of issues that existed prior to the virus will be put forward as part of the solution coming out of the virus. You know, I in a somewhat tongue-in-cheek way, earlier I talked about teleworking and something that I had probably personally been resisting that I now recognize as a result of this is going to move forward. And who's to say what other issues will be reconsidered in this light? But I would put that issue of living wage, which is just federal or state or locally mandated minimum wage laws, is not an issue that the partnership is likely to favor. We've always favored an approach where our solution to wage inequity, to use that term, is to try to raise the skill levels of Houston workers and to create more middle and high skilled jobs for those individuals to occupy. It is not to create some kind of arbitrary higher minimum wage so that people can achieve a higher living standard at a low skill level. And that's a matter of philosophy. It's a matter of, hey, for the partnership, that compels us to work hard on this issue of upskilling, and that's why we have our Upskill Houston program. Because when we say what we say, we really put an effort behind it. It's not just a defense against a living wage argument. It's how we would like to see Houston develop as a community with a skilled workforce and higher wages across the board.
Thanks. We only have time for a few more questions, and we have quite a few, so I'm going to go ahead and run through those. If we don't get to all of your questions, we will stay on the line after this, the formal program is over, to answer them in text mode. But Taylor, is there an initiative right now that's taking place with the partnership and education leaders to help with planning for reopening of schools, knowing that these K through 12 schools is really kind of the link to restarting the economy?
Yeah, definitely. So we stay in constant communication with our stakeholders, leaders from HISD and ALEAF and Aldine and other districts around the region. And there's Region 4 Service Center plays a role in that as well. And that is an ongoing discussion. You saw earlier, I guess it was just maybe yesterday or day before, that Fort Bend ISD took the step of explicitly stating that they will not be returning to the classroom this year. You know, I don't have any information as to if other districts will follow that lead. But we do remain in communication with all of the key leaders from those districts, and so Bob, you may have something else to add to that.
Not a lot. I think to some extent the individual districts have been left to almost fend for themselves in terms of how they've dealt with the COVID crisis. I mean, how do they provide instruction? How did they deal with their technology issues? How do they provide food for those students that are under the free and reduced lunch program? So they've all been, I'll say, scrambling to deal with that. There's not a lot we could do other than offer them some measure of support. But so the real focus of the combined conversation is about the fall start. How do we have an effective relaunch of education? Education, as you mentioned, Taylor, will be part of the restart conversation, both as an employer and as a business segment, but also again, we need to know how kids are being handled during the day, call it childcare, but in an education setting. Our education committee, which is really a K-12 public ed committee, has continued to dialogue. Our higher ed committee focuses on the four-year and the community colleges. They've continued to dialogue, but much of our conversation is about the fall and how we resume business. We're going, I guess we're going to wait. The governor still has something to say about public ed in terms of when schools will even be allowed to restart. Taylor, I don't know if you've heard anything in that respect. I think we're just waiting to hear.
Yeah, I know that the commissioner of the Texas Education Agency, Mike Morath, and also the chair of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, Harrison Keller, for the higher ed space, are in continuous conversation with the governor and the state health officials. And so I don't know if any decision's necessarily imminent, but I would expect that certainly as we come up to the expiration of the statewide order, there'll need to be some decisions made there.
We would have, in any restart plan, we would have clearly thought about how the schools reopened, as part of that restart plan. Now, I'm going to take it almost as a given. They're not going to see a reopening in May. It could happen, but like I say, Fort Bend's announcements, not even allowed to reopen before May 6th. That date may move back, as you mentioned. So we're likely to be restarting the Houston economy in a setting where public schools are not functioning, which means this issue of childcare looms very large. How can you restart a local economy? Now, you think, well, in the summer, what did people do in the past in the summer? Some kids were going to school in the summer. Some kids were going to various social programs in the community. We're beginning a dialogue with those social service agencies to say, what are you planning for this summer? And to what extent can we look to you to be a safe haven for these children as their parents go back to work?
Bob, want to squeeze this final question in, and one of our members, Dan Womack, has asked about your take on the oil market. Obviously, we had the OPEC decision. Texas Railroad Commission is also considering action. What have you been hearing from members in this case?
This does give me a chance to say that at our board meeting yesterday, while we spent maybe 2/3 of the time talking about COVID-19 related issues, we spent the other third talking about the issues in oil and gas, which we frankly hadn't had time to do up until yesterday's board meeting. The short answer is we had an issue in oil and gas before COVID-19, a growing surplus of crude production, largely driven by our own success with shale, and a recognition that the capital markets were pulling away from oil and gas based on both poor returns and the issue of climate change. So we knew we had an issue in oil and gas. COVID-19 has greatly compounded it. This decision by the Saudis and the Russians to pull some crude off is helpful directionally, but estimates that we're overproducing right now by, I'll say, 25 to 30 million barrels a day globally. Pulling 10 million off is helpful, but doesn't solve the problem. So we're still heading towards a situation in the coming weeks, maybe months, but likely even in the coming weeks, where the surplus crude production and the inability to find a place to store it, to simply put it somewhere, is going to create an additional downward pressure on the price of oil. So it's easy to create a scenario, as bad as oil prices are, for oil prices to continue down. And that's why, in my mind, you didn't see much of an oil market reaction to the announcement by the Saudis and the Russians, because frankly, while it's directionally helpful, it didn't solve the problem. The debate at the Railroad Commission, we had 9 hours of debate 2 days ago on that topic. I think the industry is really quite split. No one should think that that's the industry arguing for prorationing. You have some arguing for it, some arguing equally vociferously against it. The partnership's not taking a stance on that because frankly, our own membership is split on that topic. We tend to favor free trade over government intervention, but in this case, we've just decided to stay out. So I do think the net picture for oil and gas is that the trends will stay negative, perhaps throughout the rest of the year. That's employment trends, drilling trends, everything associated with oil and gas. The debate out there seems to be whether we see improvement in 21 or might it be as late as 22 or 23. it's a tough world. We've lived through these cycles before. Most people, my age we just put a mark on the wall each time we live through another cycle in oil and gas. But this one's going to be really tough.
Thanks,
Gary.
Bob. We do need to wrap up. It's after time, but just final thoughts and comments from both of you. Specifically, how can members get involved? What can they be doing to help the partnership with its efforts?
Well, I'll just say, we're getting most of our committee, council, business resource group, all that activity is being restarted. Most of it has restarted. What hasn't will be restarting in the coming weeks. I really hope that our members will take advantage of the opportunities to re-engage, because almost everything we're doing, committee, council, BRG, whatever, it's going to be focused now on recovery. How do we bring Houston's economy back? If you want to be part of that conversation, connect to any one of these groups, and you will see that that's likely the spirit of the conversation taking place at any meeting. So I would encourage you to do that. Taylor?
I couldn't say it better.
Well, thanks you to both, and I think it's an excellent session. We do have some additional questions that Taylor, if you want to stay and help us answer. Otherwise, thank you all for your participation today. We'll continue. I'll put a slide up to let you know of our future programming, and have a wonderful day and wonderful rest of the week. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Taylor.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time. That ends our meeting today.